Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of ELTAI, I welcome you all for this webinar titled Englishes of India, a 21st Century Approach to Understanding Varieties. So before we move on to the webinar, I request the audience to watch a prom clip of ELTAI. Here it is for you. Dear participants, thank you so much for watching this prom clip. Before we move on to the session, I have a few announcements to the participants. First is regarding the chat. We have a chat facility for this platform where the audience can share your views on the point discussed by the resource person during the session. Maybe at the end of the session, you can talk about your questions. You can post your questions on the chat. So once the session is done with, your questions will be answered. And I request the audience not to share your personal details on the chat, like your mobile numbers or email IDs. But for that, you can use the chat for other intellectual discussions. So with this, we have a moderator for today's session, Dr. Satish Kumar Nadimpalli. He is an assistant professor of English, SRKR Engineering College, Bhimavaram. So I hand over the session to the moderator. Satish sir, please take over. Satish, you have to switch on your mic. Your mic is on mute.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're audible. Go on, sir.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Praveen Samsa, for the introduction. I hope I'm audible to all people now. A very pleasant evening to all present here. At the very outset, on behalf of all English language teaching community, I thank my profuse thanks to the organizing committee of ELTAI for the immensely beneficial academic discourses in the form of webinars to the benefit of all language teachers. From Godavari chapter of ELTAI, operating from Sagiram Krishnam Raju Engineering College, it's an immense pleasure and privilege to welcome all of you teachers of English to the ELTAI webinar 79, which is titled Englishes of India, a 21st century approach to understanding varieties. Bharat is a country of linguistic and cultural diversity. It has a distinctive feature of nurturing a vast linguistic diversity, sheltering 4 different families of languages coexisting for thousands of years. Indian English is in fact a network of varieties resulting from an extraordinarily complex linguistic situation in the country. And this network comprises both regional and occupational varieties of English. The widely recognized dialects include Telugu English, Tamil English, Marathi English, Hindi English, and so on, alongside several more obscure dialects such as Butler English, Babu English, and several code mixed varieties of English. The present talk for today's webinar will concentrate on this phenomenon of English varieties within India. Now I deem it a privilege to introduce the resource person, Dr. Rajesh Kumar, Professor, IIT Madras, for the webinar today. Welcome, sir. Dr. Rajesh Kumar is a professor of linguistics and English language in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, Chennai. He obtained his PhD in linguistics from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Prior to joining IIT Madras, he taught at IIT Kanpur and IIT Patna in India and at the University of Texas at the Austin in the USA. He has been a visiting faculty at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai in India. His book on syntax of negation and licensing of negative polarity items was published by Routledge in their prestigious series Outstanding Dissertations in Linguistics in 2006. He has been associate director of the journal Language and Language Teaching. He has been part of the language teaching program at all the institutions he has been affiliated with. He teaches English language courses for the BSc online degree in data science and programming at the IIT Madras. The broad goal of his research is uncovering regularities underlying both the structural form and social linguistic functions of natural language. He works on the structure of South Asian languages. He is keenly interested in issues related to language in education, politics, human cognition, and landscape. I hand over the charge to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Am I audible to you?
Yes, sir. Yes, you are audible, sir. Go on, sir.
Right at the outset, I am immensely thankful to Professor S. Mohan Raj for his generous invitation. And of course, Dr. Satish Kumar, Dr. Praveen Sam, and Dr. Joseph Vinod. I am grateful to all of them and everybody else associated with ELTAI. It's an honor and privilege to be speaking on such a platform, which what you have just seen with a vast network of English teachers. Today, I am going to be talking to you about English or Englishes of India, bringing your attention to why it is not English in India. We are familiar with this term, which we often use, English in India. We will have a small discussion on these things. And my broader goal is to build an argument for understanding varieties, understanding varieties in the 21st century. And the purpose of this talk is to build on what we know about English. You know, English is almost like the story of blind men and elephant. All of us know such a story. How several blind men were asked to touch a huge giant elephant, and everybody spoke different things, different aspects about it. So I will talk about that in order to, not that story, but in that fashion, I'll try to build something on what we know. As you have heard about me, this is what I roughly do. I work on linguistic theory and language analysis of South Asia, and also look at its implications for learning and teaching, and in this context of English. My work generally translates to learning and teaching of any language, but I'm keenly interested in learning and teaching of English as well. So I thought I could not resist the temptation of speaking to such a vast audience about what I understand a bit about English in general and English learning in particular. This is what you have been. This is who I am. I wish we had a chance to meet with each other in person and interact at a leisure. Talks in general are very formal, and a talk online of this kind on such a platform becomes more formal, where you don't see the audience on the other side and the people who are listening to you. So I'm really grateful to you all for listening to me this evening. This is what it looks like when people formally present me or when I present myself. But so I don't want to read this for you. You have looked at it. It sounds a little narcissistic to talk about yourself. However, I do want to draw your attention to the last bullet about my research and teaching. And that is the part which gave me sort of confidence to speak to you, to talk about English. My experience with teaching and research in the areas of language and education, particularly multilingualism in education and its understanding, and also multilingualism in human cognition, and to extrapolate to certain sociopolitical issues as well. And I'll try to relate what I have to say to these things as well. However, before I talk about the justification of why I wanted to talk to you about this, though I have briefly mentioned about it, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about myself, which will be relevant in a context like this. I didn't want to be narcissistic, therefore I thought I usually don't like to talk about myself and my own development, but I am pretty sure in a in an audience like this, it will make more sense. Just 2 or 3 sentences about it, which is I don't remember going to schools a lot of times. I was born in a small remote village of Bihar, and schools did not work properly. This is not the platform to tell you what happens to schools in our locality, but we had a nice time of not going to schools. So I don't remember my school education at all. I do remember my high school, but until the 15th year of my age, I could not speak a word of English. Forget about speaking, I could not write my name with Roman characters. That was my situation until the age of 15. Now, this is no justification to anything. This is no justification of me not going to schools either. But I leave it for your judgment that it was not just me who was responsible for not going to schools, or families taking care of me was not responsible for me not going to schools. I'm sure it's not the situation in all parts of our country, but when we relate this to English, it will make a little bit more sense. So I'll come back to that part, and hence this personal note will probably be helpful. So I'll come back to that part. Quick justification for the title that I picked up. When I was asked for a title, I thought I will speak my mind out to you, which is what roughly I'll do. And I worked a little harder on the title, so I didn't want to let this go just like that. A discussion on Englishes is not new in our country or in the world. We know what we mean by Englishes. But I wanted your attention to this italics part of this preposition of India, which I have particularly put in that fashion, because when we say English in India, then after centuries of its existence in the country, we still mean that it's a language imported from somewhere else. It belongs to some other place. It did at some point in time, but not anymore. And we will talk about the justification for that. Why a 21st century approach? What is so special about English in 21st century? To say the least, the first child born at the sunrise, on the sunrise or after the sunrise of the first day of the 21st century is adult now in 2021 from all parameters of its adulthood. So it's not, and it's just a coincidence that in 2021 we can talk about it. So we don't even need to cross-refer to the last decade of 20th century or a couple of decades before that. But those who were around in the last 2 decades of the 20th century and have seen the first 2 decades of 21st century can see the difference in all parts of our lives. All of us can write a book about it. I often say, if we start talking about this distinction, probably in the last 200 years, human history has not seen such a big change in the last 2 decades of the 20th century and the first 2 decades of the 21st century. We know the scientific and technological developments that we have gone through. Hence, I leave them aside. I only mean in the context of English and speaking English that there has been a huge surge in the number of speakers of English in India. That is, you just look around yourself. Young kids, 5 years of age plus, or those who are born after 21st century, they sort of speak English effortlessly. I know I will be contested and I am probably making provocative statements, but I want you to understand what I say with caution, which I compare it with the last 2 decades of 21st century, and that was not the case. And I will bring you back to this point again. We attribute it to the emergence of internet, use of mobiles or social media or any other form, whatever we feel comfortable with. We can work, do research, and talk about it. Whatever we want to attribute it to, things have changed. And these kids and people in 21st century speak Indian English, English of India, or we want to say Englishes of India natively. Therefore, the 21st century is an important landmark in the historical development of English in a country like India. We will see more about this thing. So that's about me and why I wanted to talk about this thing. Let me take you through how I need to build my argument about it. Please bear with me. I can't look at you. I can't see things from here, but so I'm going to build my argument on few things. Some of these things may be too elementary to you, but please bear with me. I'm positive it will make sense. That part I'm confident about. So and here I'll give you something to think in between as well. This is one of the most interesting definitions of language that I have found in my journey of teaching and research and learning about linguistics so far. So what is it how do we define language in general? So it's a Routledge Encyclopedia of Philosophy says language is an impressive and fascinating human capacity. And human languages are strikingly powerful and complex system. One can find it little vague, but not really. In the sense that you ask everybody, you remember the story of blind man and elephant. You ask anybody about the definition of language. Definition of language is not the definition of theory of relativity or anything commonly known. People will definitely say something about language, and most of the people will tell you language is a medium of communication. It's not wrong. It is undoubtedly a medium of communication. But step back and think about it. If it was really only the medium of education, only the medium of communication, why would we speak so many languages across the world? Would it not be much simpler if we all spoke just one language? And here I am not speaking about a particular language. One can pick any and it will apply to any one of them. The communication would have been much easier. So my point here is communication. Language is definitely a tool for communication, but communication is not all about language. Hence, this definition sounded striking. Please you can have your own thought about it. I have an answer, but don't have very convincing answer. We can talk about that as well. To move my background, the background in building this further, if you talk to linguists, I'm training, I have my initial training in linguistics, and my understanding of entire domain of language and teaching of language, its applications, which is commonly known as applied linguistics. depends on year-long, huge number of years of training that I have had so far. So this is what the summary of what I understand. There are three main areas of system. When we study language, there are three basic areas in which we can broadly locate all our studies. They are structure, that is the structure of language, acquisition of language, and how languages change. All studies can be put together in one or the other three parts of this. This is why I call it SAC. It is a structure, acquisition, and change. Out of the three, structure remains the most favorite of linguists. That is because study of a structure is observable, visible. And one of the most complex things to study is the study of meaning that falls in semantics. It's part of the structure as well, but I am particularly underlining that. So most of the questions that have been asked are related to structure, and I have just quoted a few. You can add more names to this, beginning from the ancient time of Panini to everyone else in between, all the way to Bloomfield, Ferdinand de Saussure, Martini, Chomsky, among many in our contemporary times as well, have been interested in the questions of a structure. Take any research question by anybody and see where it falls. My experience, my understanding says it's in the structure of it. It's about the structure of language. What is it that we call a structure of language? There are three parts of it, broadly speaking. And again, I am purposely avoiding meaning out of it because meaning is part of the structure as well, but I am purposely keeping that out. So people study three basic things as part of the structure, that is sounds, words, and sentences. And even among all these three, so initially I talked about three: structure, acquisition, and change. So now when you look within a structure, we look at sounds, words, and sentences. And if you look at it, you will find we will be rather much comfortable with sentences than with words and than with sounds. The reason is there are very few observable differences at the level of sentences. You can find more differences, more variations across varieties at the level of sounds. Is much easier to observe. Then in the increasing order at the level of words, all one has to say is these words come from this language and these words come from that language, and that's all about it. At the level of sentence, and which is known as the study of syntax, there are very few variations. There are variations, but very few and very hard to study such variations. If time permits, I'll elaborate on that part as well. So this is the basic background for understanding variation, understanding how people study language, and what is important to keep in mind when we talk about language studies. A little bit more on language. I thought these, like I said, some of these may sound very elementary to you, and I again request you to bear with me. But I thought to many people, probably these things will be helpful. When we start talking about language in Indian context, we talk about Panini and the entire school, or in the Western context, particularly with depending upon where we are looking at, American structuralist, all the like Bloomfield, all the way to Chomsky School and Michael Halliday in Europe and so on. we talk about their definitions. But if we look at it closely, this was very, very nice when I found this, that Charles Darwin talks about language almost exactly what Chomsky would elaborate would elaborate on. And look at this definition, how simplistically it has been put. Man has instinctive tendency to speak, as we see in the babbles of our children, while no child has an instinctive tendency to bake, brew, and write. It talks about acquisition so succinctly that we can make a distinction. We can start the entire applied linguistics course with this definition and end the course with this definition, where we can see that speaking is instinctive, but writing is not. And that's the reason why millions of people across the world speaking varieties of languages can speak, but not write. A lot of people may not write. So writing gets associated with literacy, but not speaking. And that becomes a very powerful point for considering language as biological endowment. And he goes on explaining these things further. That how do we speak? How do humans speak? How do we learn to speak? Chomsky elaborates these things in a slightly different way. I'll talk a little bit about it with a reference to English, but Charles Darwin puts it like birds fly, fish swim, and humans speak. So speaking comes to human exactly the way flying comes to birds or swimming comes to fish. This innateness, and this brings us to how language becomes innate to humans, and it is this innateness which requires immediate society. That is, it requires input from immediate society. That is where Chomsky starts and builds his case for understanding language. In this context of understanding English, and the point that I have to make, this is another powerful. I have often quoted this in many works and in classes on education, particularly at Tata Institute of Social Sciences. This comes from famous anthropologist Shirley Bryce Heath. She writes a long time ago in 1984, and this is fascinating to read for linguists and non-linguists both, and particularly for language teachers, how linguistics must and can become part of general knowledge. You see, when we say we understand Newton's law, every accent has got equal or opposite reaction, that doesn't make us physicists. Similarly, when we know a bit about linguistics, bit about language, it doesn't make us anything, doesn't make us any specialist. So she writes that language increasingly will be natural part of research domains of fields ranging from computer science to industrial sociology. In the days ahead, the foundational knowledge about language that has come from linguistics will be like certain principles of mathematics, physics, and biology. By certain principles of mathematics or physics, I meant, I talked about physics. 2 plus 2 is 4, doesn't make us a mathematician. If we know that, it doesn't make us a mathematician. So you can think about it. And much before or around the same time that Chomsky was so high on his mentalistic theory, Michael Halliday came up with this argument. He has always been working up on this thing, which he writes as the first sentence of his paper in 1993. When children learn language, they are not simply engaging in one kind of learning among many, rather they are learning the foundation of learning itself. Hence, the ontogenesis of language is at the same time the ontogenesis of learning itself. Now, what learning and learning about learning is important to know. This is another thing that I want to underline to the fellow teachers of English in particular, or for that matter, any language in our country. In order to understand how we teach or how the target audience learns a language, we need to know how we learn in general. That is how humans learn. And that's what Michael Halliday talks about. So all these things are part of the background that I have to say, that I needed to build to say what I want to say very briefly. And I am aware of the time. I promise you I'll stop on time. So here are some. So now let's turn to small statistics, because numbers make a lot of sense. Don't want to go again into the details of these things, but when one needs to know that 6,700 languages approximately are spoken around the world. Nobody knows the total number of the names of 6,700 languages. I claim it with responsibility. Nobody knows the total number of languages spoken in India also. We know that according to one study, it was 1,600 or 1,700. According to one recent study of People's Linguistic Survey of India, it is somewhere between 800 to 900. We can talk, debate, but what is important for me is we don't know the names of all those languages. If you want to challenge yourself, ask wherever you live. You could be living in any part of this country. Ask yourself the names of 5 other languages spoken in your state around you. I have been living in the state of Tamil Nadu for the last 8 years, teaching at the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras. I have done this exercise in my classes. I haven't come up with 5 names so far. People tell me Tamil or Telugu or Malayalam. That's again a different matter of discussion. I am sure it will make sense to you. It will apply the same way for a Marathi speaker to come up with 5 other languages, 5 languages other than Marathi, or for a Odia speaker or a Bangla speaker to come up with 5 more languages other than Bangla or Odia. It must be much easier for speakers of Assamese, Manipuri, and others to come up with more names. Again, like I said, that's a matter of different discussion. Why these numbers? What is striking here is 90% of the world, we know about the world population, speaks only less than 100 languages. And this is you can get it now that I am coming to English. And rest of the 6,600 languages, if we believe these numbers, are kept alive by very, very small group of people, very small number of speakers compared to the wide population of the world. So this is very fascinating number. Now, where does English fit into this? English fits into this in the sense that English is the only language in the world which is in contact with every language of the world. I don't think this applies to any other language. English happens to be the only language of the world which is in contact with all languages of the world. Again, if you translate it further, it means English is spoken in all parts of the world. By not, of course, I don't mean everybody in the world, but in all parts of the world with smaller, fewer, or larger number of people. Again, this can be contested, but I am ready to argue for or against this. At the same time, and this helps you understand the flexibility of English. At the same time, if we look at India, and here definitely we are much different from countries with large population like ours, comparing us with China. India has larger number of speakers of English than total population of USA, UK, and Canada put together. I want you to understand the spirit of it, not exactly the statistics of these numbers, but that helps you understand the spread of English in our country. So, I have talked about some of these things, and because its contact situation with the rest of the languages of the world, its adaptability is remarkable. At the same time, its flexibility is remarkable, and that's the reason why it is such a dynamically live language. If we look at our country, we can talk about Macaulay minutes. These are well-known facts for at least this gathering. We can talk about spread of British Empire in our country, East India Company, or for that matter, a spread of British Empire all over the world. But it's time now, after years together, for us to step back and think: is the spread of British Empire only responsible factor for its existence in India until today? No, nobody tells us to keep English as one of the most prestigious languages of the country. I had something in the beginning to tell you. I mean, we know that English is known as language. We may, to become politically correct, we may say, no, this is not true. But you would agree with me that English at large is known as or perceived as marker of intellect, marker of intelligence, and particularly when we compare it with our own languages. If we look at our own linguistic nationalism, we know that nowhere else in the world we have more complex linguistic situation than ours. Again, that's a matter of different talk, discussion, and argument. To say the least, to talk about our language situation, we need to be really very careful. Despite of that, English retains the status of the most influential and powerful language in the country. It's not a coincidence. And it cannot, the credit of this cannot go all the way back only to Britishers and their existence in India. There are a lot more reasons. We are not playing any game here. We are aware of the reasons. But it's a fact that it's one of the most powerful languages. I mean, there are jokes about it, and I don't have time. I'm running out of time. I don't have time to take you into that. It's considered the language of elites in the outer circles. So here is one of the important slides where I want your attention, and I will come back after talking about circles of English. So we are talking about when we talk about varieties of English, we are talking about Indian English versus English of India. I have briefly talked about it. So to understand that let me put it this way. Okay, let me come back to this slide again. So here is what I need to say. The whole world of English studies is familiar with Kacheruvian circles, which came out of his studies after famous Quirk-Kacheru debate, and it's also responsible for emergence of the term world Englishes. So you're familiar with this term, and I will quickly gloss over this thing that he puts USA, UK in the inner circle, and India and several African countries in the outer circle, and countries like Brazil, China, Russia, Japan, and many other East Asian countries in the expanding circle. And this is well known for that. Why I wanted to mention this to you, because Professor Kachru was one of my teachers at University of Illinois. I have had this opportunity to have direct courses with him. But what I want to mention here in this talk is, when you look at it, it looks at only the function of English in these areas, in these countries. It doesn't look at existence of English in these countries. And for that, you need to immerse a bottom-up approach. You need to look at the English the way it exists in India. So we know about English as native languages and English as second language in countries like India, Pakistan, Nigeria, Singapore. Singapore can be counted in that. And then he comes to this point of talking about development of English as a result of empirical expansion. We have had several debates with him. No. I want to be in the particular slide. Please don't turn it back. And then English, EFL, English as a foreign language. Now, I do not want the other reason why I wanted you to understand these circles and Kachruvian model is we need to get out of this notion of native language, second language, and foreign language. We know the basic definitions of these things in the context of India as well. We need to get out of this to understand the existence of English in India. It's not just, as Kachru mentions, exclusively for international communication. Wherever English is spoken as a foreign language, it's exclusively for international communication. It's not a matter of just international communication for people of India, or even for that matter in China, in Japan anymore. Probably that was true at the time when he proposed these things. So now to talk about Indian English. I mean, again, I don't need to go into the details of this because these are some of the summaries of well discussed features of Indian English. Everybody looking at Indian English would know. So these are not my research. This is collected from different places where we know. If we are asked about features of Indian English, a huge bulk of literature is available on this, and people have come up with a lot more. I have just took a few samples to make my point that Indian English does not maintain a distinction between labiodental fricative and bilabial approximant. Labiodental fricative is often realized as aspirated bilingual sound in Indian English. Assamese, Bengali, Odia speakers tend to replace these two sounds with an aspirated sound. Most of the Hindi speakers of English do not distinguish between sa and sha. And the voiceless stops like pa, ta, and ka are not aspirated where they should be. These are some of the features of Indian English at the level of sound. I don't mean to talk about just this thing, so please bear with me. So these are some of the features at the level of sounds. I am not discussing any feature at the level of words because there is no end to that. But when you look at sentences, there are some features that one can bring out for your understanding. Like we find such sentences in English. I cannot able to tell anything. We don't find the inversion of auxiliary in complement clauses, like I know what your name is. I'm sorry. There should be a star mark on the second one. I know what your name is. What we rather get is I know what is your name. The invariant use of question tags. These are cliche examples. You are coming, isn't it? As a classical Indian English sentences instead of you are coming, aren't you? Now, these are the classical examples, and in these previous slides, I have talked about Assamese, Bengali, Odia, Hindi. By Hindi, you can largely look at Bihar, UP, MP. Again, the emergence and presence of English and Hindi heartland is a completely matter of different debate. I have a talk on that, but I again gloss it out. We don't have time to talk about that part. So if you look at these things, we see we have clubbed all these things together as Indian English. Like I had a slide here. I did not talk about that. I wanted to come back to this later, but allow me to go here one more time. So we have used the term when it comes to those features. We have used those features just as we use the term Indian culture. Broadly, people understand what we mean by Indian culture, but is there? I mean, there could be some, and this I don't want to convert this discussion into a discussion on culture, but is there one or two particular things that we can term as pan-Indian symbols of Indian culture? Don't we have things that vary all over the country? What is it that we can call as Indian culture? And like I said, I don't want to convert this into a discussion on Indian culture. So we have used, all I meant is we have used the term Indian English the way we use the term Indian culture. We need to look at this term, and we need to get into, and when I am talking about this, I do not mean at all, I do not even intend to say that people have not already started looking at these things. People have looked at these things, and I'm going to talk about few features of English spoken in Dravidian areas by speakers of Dravidian languages. So, but my point is, and here is one of the central point of understanding variation, because understanding variation is the key point for understanding multilingualism and understanding language. That we need to look at multilingualism, the definition of language as multilingualism, and I'll spend a minute on it, only a minute, and then I'll go to. I have only 2 or 3 slides more for this conversation, and then I'll leave rest of it for Q&A. So you see, you take any language. Language is not spoken the same way everywhere. For example, beginning from Chennai and maybe slightly north to go to Ongole, all the way to Trinelveli, Kanyakumari, Tamil is spoken in a variety of ways.
Excuse me,
so
sir,
if we start counting how many varieties of Tamil,
sorry to interrupt you, sir.
We won't probably know. We can broadly say 3, 4, 5, 6, or maybe we can go to 20. So how many varieties, and which one of those varieties is called standard Tamil? It applies the same way. If we look at Hindi, it is spoken from Kabul to Rangoon. Which variety of Hindi in one form or the other can be considered as standard variety?
Excuse me, sir.
And this is why I asked this question, that is English spoken the same way in UK or USA? I mean, UK is, I don't mean to sound condescending, but almost like Goa.
Excuse me, sir. So this is Praveen here. I'm very sorry to interrupt you. The time is 5:25, sir.
In 5 minutes.
The point is, Yeah. There are very interesting questions on the
Yeah.
chat.
In 5 minutes, I'm stopping.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
I need to make just 2 more points and stop. So if we look at UK in our context, it's like Goa. Is English spoken the same way all across UK? English must not be spoken the same way all across the country. We need to look at it same way. So the actual definition of multi-language is what we know as multilingualism. So multilingualism simply means our capacity to understand and navigate through different varieties of the same language as well. And if we understand language through that definition, then it solves our understanding of internal variations and varieties within English. I skip some parts that I needed to talk about acquisition, but I also needed to show you some of the features of Indian English spoken by Dravidian speakers. But I'll come back to this if there is a question in Q&A. So I strike all these things out, but allow me to talk to you about one specific thing. This is also one of the things which I have discussed. Yeah, this is the last slide that I want to talk to you. So when we look at English in the socio-political context of education, these are only a few questions for you to think. I can elaborate each one of them at an hour-length discussion or in a paper, but just tossing them out for you. Why do we have all higher education only in English in India? In the sense that we have, if we start from Macaulay Minutes to Kothari Commission or the 21st century NEP, we, in a variety of ways, we talk about multilingual education, education in local languages, and so on. But who guarantees the transfer between elementary to secondary education and to higher education, which is only available in English? Who will look at the dropouts because of these discrepancies? And learn. So, and in the context of beginning from Macaulay Minutes to NEP 2020, we need to understand that learning English is not in opposition of linguistic nationalism. So when we in a way, I'm trying to argue that learning English in a country like India must be mandatory for everybody, not just for education, but for social upliftment, social development, and so on, to say the least. Women participation in higher education can only be guaranteed through English education. Look around yourself. If you see the dropout in the rate of women participation in higher education, that is, English language is largely responsible for that. We talk about all kinds of reservations and all kinds of lip services to the participation, but that cannot be guaranteed until school education, at the level of a school, women are guaranteed English education. Just guarantee English education at a secondary level and see the surge at the higher education. In scientific domain, in technology, in bureaucracy, in politics, everywhere else. And I'll elaborate on this thing at a different time. And I want you to understand that I'm not talking about this for political correctness. And so this builds a circle, but somewhere one needs to break this thing. And therefore, I want to conclude by telling you that learning English is not in opposition of respecting our languages that we speak natively or any kind of linguistic nationalism we believe in. I stop here with apology that I needed to talk a few more theoretical points to build our understanding of variation, but I'll try to make it up during Q&A. Thank you for listening to me. And like I said, more than you, I am little worried that I was unable to. I don't know where I lost my time. I was well timed for this thing. Anyway, it's 5:30. Thank you very much for listening to me. I stop here. I enjoy face-to-face communication after this, but I'll I'll
Thank you, sir.
take as many questions as I can. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible to all?
Yes, you're audible, Satish. Go on.
Yes. Thank you, sir, for your periscopic reflection on the Englishes within India.
Shall I stop the slide presentation now?
I'll do that, sir. Don't worry. I'll do that.
And it's a compact account of how language can be looked at in terms of structure, acquisition, and change, the language contact, and language change in Indian context. He also mentioned that India, though having many language families, and it has a greater number of English speakers than the total population of USA, UK, and Canada put together. The speaker also touched upon how to look at English as a second language, a foreign language in Indian context.
Can we go to questions?
Defining phonological features of Indian English. I'll quickly take some questions over here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, please, sir. We have a question from Gurapu Damodar, which reads, since you are interested in the structure of South Asian languages, why are the peoples of East, Southeast, and South Asia, as opposed to those of Southwest Asia, often referred to collectively as Pacific Islanders, and what's the impact of English on them now? Hello. So should I repeat the question, sir?
Can you hear me, Satish?
Yes, sir. I can hear you, sir. Can you hear me, sir? Can you hear me, sir? Sir, can you hear me? Hello.
Satish, I think sir is not able to hear you. So there's some kind of an audio issue from your side.
My side?
No, from Satish's side. We all can hear. Yeah, I think I can hear what Satish says, but I don't know what is wrong. Maybe I'll read the question for you, sir.
Yeah.
Satish, may I?
Yeah, sure, sir. You can go ahead.
Yeah. So the question says, since you are interested in the structure of South Asian languages, why are the people of East, Southeast, and South Asia are opposed to those of Southwest Asia, often referred to as collectively as specific islanders, and what is the impact of English on them now?
I have no idea. Nobody is opposed to it as far as I understand. And impact of English on the study of structure, if I understand it properly, all I can say is we are not in a position, and nobody in the world is in a position to deny significance of English in any form.
Okay. So there's one more question. We end with this question.
Yeah.
The question goes like this: what is the difference between 20th century language and 21st century language?
No, I hope it is in the context of English. The difference is that there is a huge surge in the number of speakers of English and the way it is spoken. Very rarely you found use of English in different domains. So not only the domains of not only the number of speakers, but the domains of use of English language has also increased in 21st century, which were not available. And I'll give you a cliche example. You talk about terms like reservation, upload, download, to the users of mobiles. People understand these terms, which were a very low frequency. Upload was a very low frequency word in the 90s. So there is a huge surge in the domains, emergence of the domains of use of English language. Is the basic difference between last 2 decades of 20th century and the first 2 decades of 21st century.
Thank you, sir. With this, we'll end the session. I request Satish to propose the vote of thanks.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me, sir? Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. Rajesh, sir, I'm sorry. You may not be audible to what he says. Maybe he's audible to the audience. I'm sorry for that.
That's all.
Maybe there's some audio lag. He'll be definitely thanking you, but you will not be in a position to listen to
That's
that.
all right. That's okay. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, sir, for patiently answering the questions. And I now feel privileged to propose a vote of thanks. Growth is never by mere chance. It's the result of forces working together. These words reflect the superlative efforts of ELTAI community. With a deep sense, I immensely thank all the organizers and the technical supporting team for piloting this prestigious webinar series. I sincerely thank the today's speaker, Dr. Rajesh Kumar, for his insightful articulation on the phenomenon of the varieties of English in India. His talk on the Englishes elucidated the variations that exist, and I strongly believe that this knowledge will help all English teachers out there do better on their teaching learning process of the language. I must express a deep sense of gratefulness to our institution, Sagi Ramakrishnam Raju Engineering College, Bhimavaram, for all its support and encouragement. I distinctly thank all the participants of today's webinar for their active participation.
Can we end this? Can I log out?
Dr. Praveen Sam, the host of
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Satish and Praveen.
Welcome, sir. We should thank you.
Thank you.
Satish, I go on, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay, I'm done. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're done. Okay, fine. So, dear audience, there is a problem in the audio. I'm sorry for that. I would like to introduce the webinar scheduled for the next week, titled Creative Writers Toolkit. The first person is Dr. Vinod Balakrishnan. He's a professor of English from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, National Institute of Technology, Tiruchirappalli. The session is moderated by Dr. U. Nadarajan. He's a Vice Principal, GTN Arts College, Dindikal, Tamil Nadu. I once again thank the participants for patiently listening to the session and asking those logical questions. I'm sorry that we couldn't take all the questions because of the lack of time. I request the participants to participate next week webinar also and get enlightened. Thank you so much.